would not be able to make it today, but they were interested in the recording. So welcome everybody. Welcome those who are here tonight and tomorrow early morning with us. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for your interest in this very important topic. As we know, AI has come and taken the world by storm. It's become an implicit and explicit part of our lives. And those of us who are in education, like most of you in this room, are legitimately concerned and interested in all things that have to do with how AI can truly revolutionize learning. But at the same time, we have to be very cautious about the way we make it work for our students, and especially in this case, the topic that we're going to deal with today, which is related to the energy footprint and how that may or may not be sustainable. So let me start right away. Um, I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to go. Let me tell you what the roadmap is for this afternoon. Um, we're going to start with a a an exploration of the themes that are related to energy and AI consumption from an educational standpoint, and then we're going to go a little deeper into some of the issues that are more in terms of the future, sustainability, etc. But of course, we're going to try to make reference in as much as possible to uh, things that have to do with education. So as we know, AI is there's a big thread looming up in terms of AI and energy consumption. This is taken straight from our site, from the Center for AI in Education. So this is the section on energy. If you go to services and programs and you click on energy, it takes you right here with the reference section on how to try to educate our students in terms of AI and energy. For each of the sections, we have a fully developed infographic, which you can see there in detail. We're not going to explore each of these in detail, but for every one of them, there is a kind of summarization infographic with what we're doing. So, of course, in sum is we're concerned about energy consumption, as we will see. There are more dimensions than actually the consumption of electricity. And like with many of the things that we do in education at this age and time, an important part of our roles is making our students aware of some of the kind of implicit or hidden dimensions of some of these problems and issues. Let me admit everybody, by the way. There we go. Um, but in this case, again, an important part of what we do is being able to make our students aware of the implications of what we're doing, and especially with some of the themes and concepts that seem to be immaterial to them, especially the issue of the cloud. No, and as it says there, the cloud is not really a cloud. It is not ethereal. It is not up in the air. It is actually a physical thing that consumes a lot of energy, and it's very important that we tell them that the so-called cloud is actually a vast network of physical computers that consume a lot of energy. And as AI becomes, as we see there, a part of how students learn, create, etc., how it becomes an integral part of their lives, we need to be able to teach students how to use AI responsibly and how to be aware of the implications. AI, as it says there, is not a disaster. It is not automatically a climate solution. It's a little bit of everything. And as with many of the things that are related to many of these developments, exercising critical thinking and discerning the true implications of what we're dealing with is very important. So the central question is always, is it justified? If we counterbalance energy consumption, water consumption, as we will see in a minute, with the benefits that stem from the development of the AI, is it justified? So in the sections that have within, we are going to understand the footprint of what AI and energy have to do, the uses, the broader system, and the educational role. And I apologize in advance. Many of you may know a lot about this, and some of the things may be obvious, but we need to set the stage for our discussion and analysis. So, why do we need to understand? It is becoming, as we know, it is self-evident, a regular part of our school life, and as we go along, we increasingly understand that environmental awareness is essential, is quintessential to everything we do, and if anything, all that we do has to have some kind of impact on learning about the environment. No, so let me maximize the screen. Yeah. So this includes, of course, environmental awareness. We do not want to discourage students from using technology, but rather to use it with awareness and purpose. And as we can imagine, this is a very relevant topic for schools. It covers many disciplines, as you can see there. It touches upon many important themes that are again critical to student development and the acquisition of critical thinking. And there are two common mistakes that we make, and these are very much present in the narrative of the media. For on the one hand, the kind of apocalyptic doomsday scenarios, the alarmism that says that everything AI is going to destroy the world and is going to ruin our sources of energy. And the other one is as it says there, the naive optimism to think that just because AI is going to gain efficiencies, it is going to pay for its own energy footprint, which is also a little bit ingenuous in the thinking. So these are the two extremes, and as usual, we need to acquire a kind of balanced worldview in terms of how we move from guilt to intelligence, no? Which again, it transcends the learning of the technical topic itself, and it has to do more with the ability to think critically and analyze these developments. As we move into the future, and we know that and we see that, nobody can keep pace with all that is going on. So the only antidote against the frenetic and disconcerting change is exercising strong critical thinking. So we need to connect what happens when we type those prompts or when we require that AI creates an image. What is the purpose of doing that, and how that has a systemic impact in terms of energy. So let's move on to the next section. As I mentioned, every one of these has its own infographic, which you can freely download and use. So what are the basic concepts that we need to understand? And these are key to the whole issue of energy and AI. The first one is, as we know, the carbon footprint, how much or the extent to which greenhouse gases are generated directly or indirectly, and we will come to that in a second. And this is measured in carbon dioxide equivalent because, of course, not all emissions are of carbon dioxide gas, and this is a kind of universal parameter that allows us to understand how the environmental impact in terms of the equivalent of carbon dioxide as a standard gas that we use for these emissions. Very important in all of this, and again, in terms of how we raise student awareness regarding these issues, is the difference between direct and indirect emissions. Direct emissions are the ones that we see, the ones that we perceive. We turn on a car, we fly an airplane, we turn on a stove, we can see what the emissions are. But when we type something on a keyboard and that goes to a data center and that in terms requires cooling and consumes electricity, that is not so easy to discern, especially for our students. Data centers are, of course, the facilities that house these intricate, very complex, inherently very sophisticated places where all of this resides physically. Once more, the concept of the cloud is a great metaphor, but one that can be very misleading in terms of it becoming immaterial. It is not, and there's a lot of that has to do with this. Servers, graphical processing units, and chips. These are the technologies, the underlying technologies that host and respond whenever we have an AI query. And we need to differentiate between the two processes that are intrinsic to any AI model, that of training, that is when an AI model is being prepared for release or a new model is being released, and we will see that the energy consumption is minimal for the training process. But the one that is really making a significant impact on the environment is inference. So that's a technical term for the everyday use, the current transitional uses of AI models, the running of these various engines, and that is, of course, what will require a lot more energy. As it says there, a critical issue is cooling. These processes require cooling off because they generate a lot of heat. These are very energy intensive processes, many of which are grouped together. So these cooling systems, and we will see that this is critical in terms of the environmental impact, have a powerful influence in terms of the environment. And this require water use, and this is not only in terms of the overall water consumption, but also in terms of the sources of water and how this can be critically impacting certain communities where the water is located. Then, of course, we need to understand that the consumption of electricity is not necessarily synonymous with the carbon impact. We may have clean energy, mixed energy, hybrid systems, solar energy, etc. So we need to understand that it's not just about how much electricity is consumed, but rather what the source of that electricity is and how it is balanced. Grid pressure, and this is where AI may provide some kind of uh, positive impact in the future, how it can optimize the running of the energy grid, which, as we will see, has substantial inefficiencies. And a very interesting concept, one that I think is, again, very important for our students, is called the Jevons paradox. We're going to get into this in detail in a minute, but it has to do with how efficiency not always results in lower energy consumption, but the opposite. So this is our a kind of conceptual map. AI requires computation. That, of course, implies that we use hardware. It consumes electricity. It generates a lot of heat that needs cooling, and the scale of the energy and water consumption will affect communities. So there is a summary, and we will now go into understanding how AI consumes energy. Again, here's the detailed infographic that can be freely downloaded. So a simple AI interaction is not just typing something and getting in return. There are certain steps that, again, students need to understand. We send a prompt, it travels through a network. It doesn't just go out into the air. It's either through satellite or cable or fiber optics or whatever, and that consumes energy. The data center, the place where the AI server is housed, will process the request. The processing of the request requires a lot of electricity because this is a processor-intensive activity for every one of our quests. And these almost miraculous answers that we get, it requires a lot of computing power beyond anything we've ever seen before. And in the process, the system generates substantial amount of heat that needs to be cooled off to remove that heat. In most of these cases, it involves water use. There are some newer cooling technologies that we will see in a few minutes. But for the time being, there is a huge energy and water consumption. In the old days, when the activity that consumed the most water was Bitcoin mining, people located these Bitcoin mining factories near water dams, especially in places like China, where there were many hydroelectric power plants that weren't in use. But these have long ran out of them. So that's again the whole issue of water and how it affects the local supply for your community is an important one. And then, of course, the response is sent back, and that is not gratuitous in terms of energy. The whole journey has to be reversed in terms of network, traversing through the network and going back to the computer. So it's important that when we refer to AI use, it's not always the same. And this is, again, crucial to the whole generation of energy problem. A short text explanation, longer conversation, analyzing a document, images, video, agents, automation, and then how, to what extent is it justified? No, but as we will see in a minute, the energy consumption of each of these is very different, to the point where OpenAI, for example, has discontinued their video generation Sora software. They've discontinued it because it required too much energy and they couldn't balance their budget for that. But as you can infer from here, the energy consumption is in increasing order in these activities, and we shouldn't equate each of them in terms of AI use. So as we mentioned earlier, there are two stages: the training process, where the initial systems have been trained and learned, they learn to become efficient in their use. And this is a continuous process also, because it's not just that they do one version and that's it. As we very well know, these systems are continuously updated, so energy is consumed in the training process. And inference is again, the transactional use of AI for everyday use, and that bears the bulk of the energy consumption. No? And of course, the scale matters. And as we endeavor to teach our students to think critically and start getting into systems thinking, we need to understand that, yeah, a single use is insignificant, but grasping the dimension of the the multi-billion uses that are used every day, that are in effect every day, it requires a different mindset. So it's again, we need to understand that AI uses resources and we need to think in terms of the purpose of when we use it and how we use it. Let's move to the next section again. So here we differentiate between carbon footprint and energy consumption and energy use. And again, this is a common question, but it's an incomplete question. We're going to see some comparisons later on about how AI impacts. It's estimated that the current consumption will result in 3% of the total power consumption in the world in terms of electricity. But again, in terms of raising environmental awareness, it's not just how much electricity, but what kind of electricity powers it in terms of fossil fuel heavy electricity, low carbon electricity, the efficiency of the power plants in question, and many other factors that are critical in terms of the environmental impact of AI. So, of course, energy use is important. Where does the energy come from? Where is it located? Now, again, this is not a trivial issue. If we're going to have, for example, one of the issues that are being discussed is some kind of regulation where the data centers that house AI development, heavy AI development, need to be that a regulation is enforced so that these centers are physically located in places of clean energy, so that they are not, so they are quote unquote forced to consume clean energy and not heavily dependent carbon fossil energy. No, and of course, when is the electricity used? There's also issues with balancing the load of the network. So of course, during peak hours in certain parts of the world, there's a lot more consumption than late at night. So there's also a discussion on whether there should be regulations about when the electricity, when the power is consumed at a certain time of day. No? So again, why location matters? Because the sources of energy, as we all know, is not easily transported. So how close are we to clean sources of energy? That is also an important consideration. To reduce the footprint of AI, we need efficiency in terms of improved technologies that consume less energy, as we will see in a minute. A lot of progress has already been made, and there are substantial gains in terms of lower energy consumption for the new generation of the TPUs, the tensor processing units that are being developed. As you know, there's a big race going on between NVIDIA, some Chinese companies, and the such in terms of producing lower energy consumption chips. The sources of energy, as we just touched upon, and then when is it justified that we use AI? Again, what is the ethical use of these resources? No, when we say renewable energy, it can mean, as it says there, very different things in terms of the source of the energy. Is it clean energy at all times? Does it what one of the issues that again we will cover in a minute is many of the cleaner sources of energy are unstable in terms of their energy generation especially for climate factors in terms of the level of the rivers, and as we will see in a minute with an interaction that we've developed in terms of the weather forecast. Like if there is no wind for eolic energy, or there is no sun for solar energy, we need to rely on carbon fuel to power the sources of energy. So and then very important, as it says there, the positive side, the promise of AI. Will AI be able to pay its own energy bill? What can AI in general terms do for energy efficient? On the one hand, it can improve the redundancies in the grids in order to sustain a baseline level of consumption. Many of the energy grids are designed in a way that they have multiple redundancies, just in case, again, for climate factors, the cleaner sources of energy are not available at the time. So by forecasting, as it says on the box on the left, we can predict when a certain energy source will be at a certain level, and that would allow us to better dimension the grids and not have to rely on so much redundancy, and as such be a lot more efficient, especially in terms of not having of actually maximizing the output of the cleaner sources of energy. And of course, in general terms, AI can also help generate a more efficient consumption of energy. So not just about AI, but in terms of traffic lights, smarter buildings, public lighting, LED, etc. So again, electricity tells us how much we need in terms of energy, but the carbon impact is what really matters and tells us what the impact of energy is. Let's go to briefly explore the local infrastructure problem. And this has to do with that even though the frequently analyses are global, and AI services, as it says there, may feel borderless, but the physical infrastructure exists in real communities. There's a typical example is Ireland. Ireland, for tax reason, houses some of the most important data centers for many of the big AI and tech companies like Facebook. So there's a big problem in terms of energy and water consumption in regions near Dublin in Ireland. I don't know if we had some people register from Ireland, so they may I don't know if they're here today, but they may relate to this. So the infrastructure of AI depends on resources and public systems in terms of electricity, as it's fairly obvious, in terms of the needs for cooling and water, and that requires access to sources of water. And of course, in terms of the land and networks that they occupy. And as the phrase says there, the global analysis or the global average can actually mask the local impact, the stress that is placed on the community. And even if the global share of that energy impact or electricity impact is small, it can be very, very stressful for a certain region or electricity grid. And again, this comes to how some of the regulations are being planned in terms of distributing these in like not allowing the proliferation of data centers in places that would heavily tax the energy needs of the community. It's also, so again, it can affect public infrastructure and not private companies. And there are some questions there, like, for example, if you allow the development of a new data center, how will that impact the public network? Will it compete with other users? And so on and so on and so forth. So beyond electricity, these three factors, as we've seen already, water and cooling, how much land is occupied by these data centers, especially if they want to rely on solar energy. As you know, in order to generate substantial amounts of solar energy, you need a vast footprint, a vast area footprint. And the community impact, which may, again, bring investment, tax revenue, jobs, etc. But we also need to think in terms of the negative impact. And then who's paying for the infrastructure? If they require upgrades. So if a data center may generate new jobs and provide an economic stimulus to a region, but if they require more electricity, who should pay for that? Should it be the company? As we will see in a minute, there's a little bit the case that some of these companies are the bigger companies like Amazon, OpenAI, or Google are investing on their own power sources. So again, so the infrastructure conversation, like everything, we need to keep a healthy balance on the analysis. There are benefits, as we can see on the box on the left, investment, jobs, economic stimulus, etc. But there are, of course, some potential important risks in terms of the environmental stress on the local community. So the system services, the data center, so AI services require data centers that, again, heavy AI traffic is not globally evenly distributed. We may be using AI as we are right now when we use ChatGPT or any of the other sources, and we may be impacting a data center that is located thousands of kilometers away from us. So that places a stress on local systems and communities. So again, we need to think in terms of moving from the kind of irrational guilt to a systemic thinking, and that will transcend far beyond the technical issues related to the environment. No? So there are questions there, but in terms of, again, the most important thing is to be able to raise student awareness regarding these very important issues. This is fascinating. It's called the Jevons paradox, and it's again explained there in great detail in the infographic. But this basically says that greater efficiency does not reduce total consumption, because as we create technologies that consume less energy, there are more intensive energy uses after efficiency improves. Meaning, okay, now we get excited if we can create chips that can produce high resolution video at a fraction of the energy and the cost, then we will be demanding a lot more. Imagine if every one of us who has a paid account for, the $20 a month that many of us have, if we were allowed to do 30-minute Pixar style videos, we would be playing around all the time with that. So if a technology was invented that provided an energy breakthrough and allowed people to play around with these things, it will probably result not in less energy consumption, but in greater energy consumption. Because as we develop further uses, consumers, customers will use a lot more of these systems. So again, more efficient AI can still mean a lot more of total AI use. The sequence is there. AI is more efficient. It's cheaper. Then we use it more. The tasks become more energy intensive, and paradoxically, again, the Jevons paradox, total demand may rise. No. So as we saw earlier, the lower energy consumption is text and reasoning. Images and video, again, images are okay. Video is a higher order of magnitude in terms of energy consumption. And when we program the famous agents that can do a lot of independent tasks on their own, the sequence of tasks that need to be performed, and they are performed asynchronously, they take a lot longer time, as we know, than a simple text prompt. So that consumes a lot of energy. So again, can the question we need to kind of inspire students to ask is the use of AI justified? Is it ethical to use AI for mere entertainment or pleasure? Or to what extent is that allowed? And we will see again that there are interesting comparisons in terms, for example, of streaming video. No? So a tool can be efficiently and still be used poorly, and efficiency matters, but it needs to be paired with judgment. Let's move on to how AI can actually form part of the climate solution. So again, we have the same thing there. So AI, again, like a lot of what to do with AI, the narrative is very negative. And AI can also result in some energy efficiencies and gains. So as we will see in a minute with one of our simulators, AI can help us predict demand and production from the power plants, and even alert regarding environmental failures or environmental risks. As we also mentioned earlier, many of these grids have tremendous redundancies. The power grids are also quite outdated in terms of their efficiencies. So AI can serve as a means of optimization, and it can also do what we humans are not so good at doing, which is monitor environmental changes, weather patterns, emissions, etc. One of the problems that we face in terms of environmental awareness is that we don't have very good data. We really don't have data that is compelling, and AI, as we all know, has an enormous capacity to garner insights from vast amounts of organic data. So these are some of the positive environmental impacts of AI. As we mentioned, smarter electricity grids. It can be a lot more efficient in predicting the output from some of the cleaner energy sources, as we will see in a minute. It can also, of course, result in gains in the consumption of energy for smarter buildings. Smart cities are very much in fashion now. It can optimize transportation, traffic lights, traffic flows in general. So the application of AI, which is relatively new to these very, very big environmental problems especially in urban settings, can result in interesting efficiencies. There are already applications to agriculture and food systems. There are systems that will that are now customizing the amount of irrigation and fertilization for crops regarding with image recognition. So they're a lot more efficient in terms of resources that are invested on agriculture and make the production of agriculture and food more efficiency. Satellite monitoring coupled with AI, like with image diagnosis in medicine, it can become a lot more precise, accurate, and prescient in terms of forecasting issues that have to do with the environment in terms of deforestation, fires, etc. It can trigger early warnings regarding fires, which, as we know, And we have several people from Canada here who have suffered recently from wildfires, so that can be important. Of course, the whole issue of industrial emissions, AI can be applied to more efficient industrial processes, cleaner energy, etc. And of course, the whole issue of climate science can be vastly improved with AI analysis. Interesting here, the defensible versus the less defensible uses, but we can work in our schools in terms of analyzing our own carbon footprint. If we have solar panels, trying to forecast that, etc. So there's a lot of again positive applications of AI that we need to take into account. AI is in general an accelerator, and if we are targeting climate progress, AI can be a catalyst, a literal catalyst for some of that. So again, AI has a footprint, but it can also reveal energy footprints, environmental footprints that were previously invisible. This is a very important concept, and part of what we need to make our students aware of as we tread into this uncertain future. There are certainly threats to and negative sides to AI, but it's not just a negative narrative. And a lot of the conversation should now be centered on how to use AI productively and efficiently for some of these positive uses. Let's go to some classroom tools now in terms of how to discuss AI and energy responsibly. So this is not, again, the naive or the alarmist, the doomsday scenario contrast polarization between AI as an evil force or AI as a force for good that will save the world. The ethical question, again, the ethical imperative is not just because of energy. Does it justify using AI as a tool, not as an infrastructure? Being aware that every time we hit send, every time we type a prompt, we are generating energy consumption, and maybe change the narrative from destroying to analysis of costs. AI is clean because it's digital. Again, there are some indirect emissions that we're not aware of. From never using AI to using it purposefully, supporting learning. AI will solve climate change. It can support climate action. So again, as we know from our experience as educators, our narratives are very impactful on our students. No, so again, discerning between higher value uses and lower value uses, when it's worth using AI, when the energy consumption is justified. And once more, it's essential that we transcend the kind of individual focus in terms of thinking systemically in terms of the massive scale. This is beneficial not just for this topic per se, but in terms of allowing our students to develop a global mindset, one that can see the full extent of the problem and not just the individual scope of what we're doing. So wasteful AI is also weak educational use. And another of the constraints that we face is that, as we will see in a minute, there aren't really very precise numbers or values or measurements regarding energy consumption. But having a ballpark figure and having an order of magnitude estimation of the AI consumption, for example, there are wide variations in the estimation, but there's a sort of consensus that the electricity footprint of all AI systems in the world for this year is going to be around 3%. It could be around 3-4%. So again, is that precise? No, but it's probably quite, if it's not 3% or 4%, it's going to be 5%. It's not going to be 20%. And it's also interesting in terms of teaching our students that we not always need to have very precise values, but being able to discern the kind of global impact and the kind of general picture is very important. It is difficult to calculate because these are very complex systems and a lot of the information is not publicly disclosed, but we do need to understand that this needs to be used thoughtfully. So there are some questions there, which again are just a suggestion to guide the discussion. Let me show you now a couple more things before we get into a little bit of the data. So classroom practice, AI and energy is, of course, just the first step. When does AI become meaningful, especially in terms of the cognitive development of our students? AI and energy are just, an introduction, a first step to build judgment on things that are related to AI, which are going to be invasive, implicit, almost inherent to our lives. So again, we need to be on alert, not just for energy. What are the hidden layers? What is the value of what we're doing? And we need to be, again, curious and active. And that is a global mindset that we need to transmit to our students. So the 5-question AI energy check. What about why am I doing this? Will this improve my learning, thinking, creativity? And as you can see, of course, that is a lot more important than anything else in school. Is that the best way to achieve the objective? What is the scale of what is the scale of the reproduction of what I'm doing? And what did I learn to improve because I used AI? Again, here it's compare uses, investigate, critique the output, and design better prompts. But that, of course, transcends a lot of what we're saying now. So let me move on to, this is fairly straightforward, and it's more of what we've seen so far. So these are some of the tools that we are making available on our site. Let me move to the next section, and I will show you that in detail. So in this section, we have some tools. So these are the tools that we have. One is the home carbon footprint calculator. These are all on OpenAI, on ChatGPT. I'm going to show you two of them today just for the sake of our limited time. This one is one where you can even upload photographs of your home, showing the various appliances, the number of cars you have. The system is trained to ask the user questions, and it will estimate to a fair degree of accuracy the carbon footprint of that home. Again, this is intended for educational use, and it's just the big, like with many things that are related to AI, estimating the carbon footprint should lead to a lot of further discussions and analysis. It is not the end product. We also have an environmental impact report generator, so you can enter even a publicly available project, industry development, anything, and the system is trained to produce an environmental impact report. Of course, like anything we have in AI in any language. And the system will give you a fully developed environmental impact report. You can even upload maps, and it will analyze the map and produce maps with the environmental impact. The system is trained for that. I'm not showing this now because it does take time for the system to work its magic. And let me show you the other two, the solar energy forecast tool and the greenwashing detective. These are a lot of fun. So if I go to the solar energy forecast tool, let me know if you are seeing my screen. We should be seeing ChatGPT. Are we okay with that, or did it open in a new screen and you're not seeing it?
You're good.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is, we're going to say, thank you for that answer. Let's operate in English. So the IPCC, which is an international organization dedicated to environmental awareness, has a database, a fascinating database of power plants. It's extensive. It has tens of thousands of entries. Let's going to show me the power plants, let's say in Argentina. So it has a global database of power plants. We've streamed these to the clean energy sources. These are only solar energy and hydroelectric energy. So solar plants. These are just solar plants. So what this does is it tells us the expected output of energy with as much detail as we want for the solar plants based on the weather forecast for that day. So it will take the location, the geographic location, which is in the IPCC database that we fed into the system, and it will forecast the energy consumption for the plants for these solar plants for that day. So it's going to take a little time. We're consuming energy now. There it is. So these are the solar energy LATAM databases. These are the only two that exist in Argentina. They're both in San Juan. So I'm going to say, please tell me, sorry for my typing, the forecast energy production for tomorrow and explain in detail. So this is an example of, again, for pedagogical use. It's going to tell me based on the weather forecast for tomorrow what the production is for these two plants. IPCC is a fascinating organization. As a matter of fact, they won together with Al Gore the Nobel Peace Prize a few years back for their work on environmental energy. And they have some fascinating stuff, especially in terms of data. So it's going to look for the weather forecast. They will give me the estimated output based on that. Let me pivot back to, okay, let's keep it there. Sorry for that. We're consuming a little bit of energy now. But I guess this would qualify as purposeful use. So it's considering conditions between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. San Juan is for those of you who are not in Argentina, it's one of the provinces or the locations that has the most number of days of sun in the year. So that's why they're located there. If you look at that, again, this is a publicly available database that we can download. It is fascinating to see the different number of power plants in terms of fossil energy or clean energy that each of the countries has. And this is all over the world. Again, it has tens of thousands of entries. In this case, we've only filtered it to the ones in Latin America for our use, because if not, the system would be too slow. So give us a couple of extra seconds. As we witness the stream of consciousness of our tool here, let me see. So now I want it. There. So while it does that, let me show you another. Let's see. So the other thing we have here is a fascinating quiz. So this is a general conclusion, ready to test our understanding. We have an energy quiz that will show us, I think, 30 multiple choice questions. Energy versus carbon. Two AI data centers use the same amount of electricity. One runs most on a coal heavy grid. The other runs on a low carbon grid. Which statement is more accurate? Low carbon means low water. No. Same energy, different carbon footprints. Okay, there we go. So there is correct. And it gives you an explanation when you get it right and when you get it wrong. So for example, I'm going to get this one wrong on purpose. The data center is powered by renewable energy. Which question most directly tests the strength of that claim? This, of course, is not the correct answer. No. So again, it tells us what the correct answer is, and it gives us an explanation. This is all on our website, and it gives you a total score out of 32 questions, which can be a lot of fun to play around with students. Okay, so tomorrow here is June 24th. There is the weather forecast for both plants in the database. So there, as you can see, it gives us the energy estimation for each of the plants, and it gives us an explanation of how it arrived at that number. So this is, again, our simulator. Let me show you one more. This is a fun one. Let me go back to the previous section. So here we have the greenwashing. Greenwashing is the technique that is used by several companies to make environmental claims that are not really substantiated. This will, we will upload. So I'm going to say, let's operate in English. And if I upload some advertisement that has certain energy claims, it's going to inspect that for greenwashing. Greenwashing, again, is the practice whereby companies, like, if you can see, let me make these things bigger. No, extra large icons. So there you can see, for example, some of the ads, sweetness from natural sources, climate change doesn't do borders. Let's do this for Coca-Cola and see if this is greenwashing or not. You don't have to tell it anything. So it's going to analyze that advertisement. And this is fun for critical thinking. What I see in the ad: environmental promises detected, sweetness from natural sources, direct claim, lower calorie, indirect claim, the green label, grass outdoor setting and life, suggested emotion, the ad creates a feeling of freshness, etc. So vague language, lack of evidence, exaggeration, omission of impact, etc. Suspicion level, medium. So once more, the critical thinking piece is essential, absolutely essential in the whole proposition regarding energy. So this greenwashing detective is a fun way to engage students in, in how to detect these. Maybe they can do it first, and then they can test it with the detective, and this raises their level of awareness, critical thinking, and that, as we know, is essential, absolutely essential for this. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second. I'm going to change now. I'm going to share a presentation with you. So let me just share a different presentation, which is a little bit more into some of the deeper issues. So this is one that is a lot more formal in terms of research and data that we created with Notebook LM, which I'm sure many of you have used extensively, and if you haven't, it's a fascinating read mode. There we go. So there it is. We've seen this already. So there you can see the energy escalation, the strain on hydrological systems, and the Jevons paradox. This is an interesting one. This is the projected consumption for 2030. Highly uncertain. Nobody can tell what will happen from now to 2030, but we can see that it tends to follow a linear progression in terms of the consumption of energy. These are the differences which we already covered between training and inference. Training is how we get these systems to work, how we create new systems, and inference is the everyday use. So we can see there that the lifetime consumption of a model is dominated by inference, as we can see there, in 80 to 90%. No? And here is the peak demand spike. One of the other problems that we haven't mentioned so far is that these systems require greater cooling and air conditioning systems when the demand for air conditioning and energy is the highest, when we're in the warmer years. So, and you have some really staggering data there in terms of 9.3 trillion liters, which we can't dimension, but it matches, as it says there, the domestic water needs of 1.3 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa. Let me just close this. And this is an interesting chart comparing the energy consumption for what we used to do, a standard Google search, a kind of more sophisticated Gemini prompt. When we just use ChatGPT for the usual uses, an advanced model, one of the latest models, and this is the interesting one. Look at how much we consume when we do video streaming. Video streaming is kind of the hidden villain in the whole equation. There's a heavy internet consumption, energy consumption with that, with video streaming. Let me just there. So again, the issue regarding the grid is that because of the peak consumption, there's a lot of redundancy that can be made more efficient. And here are some of the investments on energy that some of the bigger companies are making, as you can see there. So it's interesting that they are very aware that energy is a critical issue and that they need to invest on their own sources of energy because they can't rely on public infrastructure as they grow in in the use of AI. So there are some of the hardware innovations. Interesting, the closed loop liquid cooling. These are systems that do not rely on water exclusively for their use. They can be recycled. It's interesting that some systems are already thinking of using the heated water from the cooling systems in AI to heat and provide warming to households in cities. So again, these are all under analysis, but the industry understands really well that this is an essential critical path as we move along. This is the Jevons paradox, which we discussed earlier. It's very, very clearly explained there that as we improve in efficiency, we end up, as it says there, unlocking new modalities, and that results in even more consumption. And this is how AI can actually improve and become a positive agent for energy consumption, as you can see in terms of balancing the load, forecasting and making the grid more efficient so that it doesn't have to be including so much redundancy and reliance on fossil fuels for periods of low energy generation. Some of the problems that are already existing there in different parts of the world, which we can see later. And this is the projected some of the three scenarios: high efficiency if we really gain in terms of AI optimization of energy plus efficiencies in hardware. The base case is probably the most probable one. So this is probably the one that, so for comparison, where this would be 3 or 4 times what this has now. Net impact policy, again, we mentioned this earlier. Implement spatial siting standards mean data centers would only be allowed if they comply with certain energy requirements, or if they're situated, as it says there, directly in tie with hydrological limits in places where they can tap into clean energy resources that are renewable. So again, the footprint of artificial intelligence is massive. It's growing. Nobody can really tell how much it will impact the future, but as you can see, in terms of our role as educators, there are multiple dimensions, and it's essential that we engage in a critical analysis of the whole thing. Let me just share very quickly, before I open it up to questions and discussions, our website and the Center for AI in Education, which we are opening up formally today. So let me just get this out of the way for a second. This is just going to take 5 minutes. Let me maximize the screen. So this is our initiative that our team has been working on for the last 6 months or even more. This is let me go to the home page here. So as we have briefly touched upon, this is a website, a hub that intends to serve schools and education organizations in terms of AI in education. There are many dimensions. This is today's talk. We are publishing a weekly update. So if I click in here, this gives us a comprehensive update on artificial intelligence news for educators. This is for the period from May 23rd to July the 13th. So these are the latest news, so that we have one section where all of the latest news are there. And of course, if you click on this one, it will take you to the origin of the news. Then we have a curriculum hub. The curriculum hub has a full curriculum for the whole range of school in terms of how to have students learn about artificial intelligence in education. There are 3 dimensions to the curriculum hub. One is a curriculum framework. It is a conceptual structure. Again, it's essential, it's imperative that we have our students become literate in how these systems work and that they can think critically about these future AI developments. So here we have, for every age level, 3 different points of entry. This is the complete framework. So if I click here, it's going to take me to a framework for AI, in this case for early childhood. Of course, this is not technical AI used. This is more about critical thinking and connecting with technology in our everyday lives. Let's go back. If we go to, and then for every one of these, you have a yearly planning. So you have a 36-week plan, for example, in this case for grades 1 and 2 in kindergarten, a full syllabus with units. Each of these units are developed in there. So you have a full curriculum for 36 weeks for each of the grade levels, all the way to the secondary school. Let's go back. And the same for all the grade levels. And then you also have independent lessons. So for each grade level, all the way to the secondary school, all the way to graduation, we have independent for again, it's understandable that schools will not be able perhaps to have a full 36-week curriculum. So we have 10 lesson plans for each grade level. For example, this is for, let me see, this is for grade 5. So in grade 5 elementary school, if you open full lesson, there you go. So here is each of these lessons on how to teach AI literacy. They are all independent and can be used on their own. A very important part of our program is the AI standards. There are two sets of standards that are ready to be used in schools: the general standards and the detailed standards. This is a full, extensive reference of standards for families, staff, and for students. Let me open the general standards. These are simpler. So this is an infographic with standards at a glance. They are meant for students, for family, and for staff. They are, of course, separated by grade level. There are 3 levels to each of the standards: minimal use, standard, and encouraged. And each of the standards integrates learning and thinking, responsibility and safety, and human and school responsibility. So that's how the framework works. So for example, if we go to a certain level, we have 15 standards for each grade level. For example, these are, let's go to lower secondary to change the age level. So this is for ages 12 to 14. The minimal use, these are specific expectations for students, families, and staff at 3 levels. This is minimal use. Observable evidence for each of them. Standard use, some more in-depth use and expectations regarding AI, again with observable evidence, and the same for encouraged use, in this case for ages 12 to 14. So these are standards that schools can use and can, of course, adhere to and reference in their programs. As I mentioned, there's also a detailed set of standards that has a lot more in-depth standards for every domain, including, let me just show you very quickly how that works. If you go to the detailed standards, if a school is interested in that, these are a lot more sophisticated in terms of, again, there are 7 domains: ethical and social implications, application and context of use, AI literacy, cognitive extensions, and of course, these are multiply interchangeable and you can use any or all of them, and they are explored in a great level of detail for each of the student bands, as you can see there. So there's a lot of content. There's a lifetime of content in terms of standards. A very important dimension is what we call cognitive extension. The real risk of AI is stifling cognition. The opposite, efficient, purposeful use of AI, entails developing pedagogical applications that allow students to extend their cognition. So for each grade level, we have a set of activities. Let's go to grade 9, for example. This opens up an activities library. It is categorized by topic. It is fully searchable. So for example, if we go to science, this will bring up the science activities here. So for example, here it tells us how to build a cell city. It tells us what the tool is, but of course this is interchangeable, and it has a full lesson plan to help extend cognition. So there are literally hundreds of activities which we will be updating all the time in terms of how we can extend cognition using AI. We also have a set of AI assistants, which are like the ones that we showed today for the greenwashing detective and the solar plant simulator. Look at all the stuff. Again, we can't, for reasons of time efficiency, there's no way we can go through all of them, but look at all the stuff that is there for use for our members. Each one of them will open up into ChatGPT, and it will take you directly to the interface for each of these applications that are all available for our members, including some of the administrative processes, some of which are not the most enjoyable in the context of school. Very important also, we have a whole section with professional development, including our diploma pathways. The first 2 courses are already there for our July 21st and July 29th. Every member has access to at least 2 courses a month, and they can build up. There's a 6-strand curriculum for classroom applications, pedagogical innovation. These are, of course, all free for members. And there's also a diploma pathway. If you comply with a certain number of courses, there again, we can explore that. That can be freely explored later. But there's a whole sequence of recognition for users, teachers who comply with these courses. We will be publishing videos for the courses as we run them for access by the members. But of course, in order to attain the certificate, you have to be present in the course. We also have a catalog of tools, which is constantly updated. Some of the more popular tools that are there, which you can visit with, they're categorized by type of use with a brief description. I'm sorry that I'm going very quickly, but there's a lot of stuff in here. There's also a legal observatory, especially for school heads. This is an interactive ChatGPT application that will tell you, it will first ask you where you are, what jurisdiction that you're in or country or district is, and then you can ask questions regarding what is appropriate or not in terms of the legality of what you're doing, in terms of the regulations of AI. So that is there, and it's available to members also. This is an advisor that you can click on there. We also have a Projects and Vision Hub. We expect to launch this in August for members to collaborate on a 6-week process where they will be collaborating on a weekly basis to develop their collaborative AI processes on an asynchronous and synchronous meetings mediated with some of our staff. So again, we're opening the wait list already, and we expect to launch this in August. Finally, very importantly, then there's of course the energy section we've just covered. This is about conferences. This is an important one, the Ethics Hub. We've already seen the curriculum section. The Ethics Hub, the ethical dimension of AI is of course imperative, fundamental in anything we do in the future for education. And we've created a fully fledged ethics hub. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes here. So there's an exploration of key topics in here, a library of topics that provides a guide to the biggest ethical questions in AI for education. So for example, if you talk about data privacy, consent and safeguarding, you open the topic, it gives you a full disclosure, full explanation of what the topic is, how it shows up in schools, what are the common risks and failure modes, and what the recommended practices are. And you also include on each of them some kind of classroom dilemma and decision questions that are related to each of these major themes and topics related to ethics. Let me go back to the Ethics Hub again. We also have decision tools there. So practical tools to help school adopt AI in a responsible way. So we have an ethical evaluation checklist. Again, purpose, uses and context, safety and safeguarding. So this can act as a one-stop guide to why we would be using or developing an initiative using AI. And you have even some red flags there, which will tell us when to hit the brakes. And this is a fascinating part. We have a full library of ethical dilemmas for classroom use, so that students can read the scenario, choose a role, debate options, and apply ethical lenses. These are for upper primary, lower secondary, and upper secondary. Of course, lower primary, they're too young for that. Again, stakeholder impact map. These are the dilemmas. As you can see, for example, this is for, let's go to lower secondary, for example, real life dilemmas. Okay, self-driving car. So this in lower secondary presents a scenario with an autonomous driving car. These are the options. These are the discussion prompts, the closure task, and some reflection questions for classroom use. So again, in this very important topic related to ethics, there are some ethical dilemmas that are ready to use in the classroom setting, fully categorized by age level. We also have a tour section if you want to play around later. We have a full tour of each of these sections available on our site, and a forum, which we will also start, I believe, in late July, so that people can exchange ideas, etc., for open to all our members. This is a membership model. There are various models for membership. As we can see, there's individual and school membership. And of course, we are open to any questions or further information that you may require. And we hope you find it of value. Let me stop here. Let me also stop the recording. Let's stop the sharing. Let me stop the recording.